Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's that time of year again where we go through a tier list for each of the formats. So this video I'm going to start with V Premium, and then I have Premium and Standard lined up for the next two. If you guys need any coaching for the BSF or BRO season, feel free to hit me up on my Metafy. My link is in the bottom right hand corner. Feel free to hit me up a session and we can get started. This is post the ban list that just got released with, the maiden hit, the release of Melody, so the Meep, and pretty much how kind of V shapes. We knew what the decks were, what builds were viable from the Worlds format. But now that we had this ban list, this is a topic that I think we should definitely touch on, because with the destruction of Maiden or the exclusion of Maiden, in essentially the whole big picture, there are some decks that are much more viable now than what they were before. So I didn't realize that this pie chart actually labels everything in alphabetical order, and I was going to start with Angel Feather, but I've started every tier list with Angel Feather, so I'm going to start with Tachikaze. Tachikaze is, to be honest, nowhere to be seen. The support that it got from Clan Collection before, it didn't make an impact before, and it doesn't now. So a lot of these clans are very similar to what I depicted in the previous video, which would have been like maybe 3 months or 6 months ago. So yeah, make sure you keep that in mind. Shadow Paladin. So Shadow Paladin actually goes at the top now. Shadow Paladin now is essentially one of the big dogs in the format, only because, Maidens is no longer a thing. And yeah, it reverts back to a Luard format. Luard is, super strong now. One of the decks that gatekeeped it was Maidens. And, now that Maidens is gone, Shadow Paladin is suddenly good again. So yeah, expect to see a lot of Shadow Paladin come the BSF season, probably in BRO as well. Actually, BRO just finished. So no, not BRO, in BSF season, and probably the BCS season, given that, we don't actually have any implications of a new clan collection whatsoever at the moment. But if, everything stays the same till the end of the year, this is a deck to look out for. Spike Brothers. So Spike Brothers is all right. We saw a recent win with it in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. The deck is okay. The reason why I think that Spike Brothers ended up winning the Germany one was the lack of players. And I think if it's a lack of players, then, it's more concentrated on the people who want to play their favorite decks. And not to get, not to discredit that player obviously playing good. I just feel that Spike Brothers as a whole, in comparison to some of the other decks in the format, is just way, way below the benchmark. Especially if you're looking at, the likes of Bermuda Triangle, Shadow Paladin, even some of the others like Gold Paladin. Like, Spike Brothers is not there yet. I think it's missing just like 1 card or 2 cards even. And then yeah, pretty much it's there. Next is Royals. So Royals is an A tier deck with Jewel Knights. Jewel Knights, previous to that, was a pretty good contender going into Steam Maiden. Now, there is an argument where you can put this as low S, but I think a definitive S tier is quite, foreseen in this format. So we'll put Royal Paladin in the highest of A. Jewel Knights was good, in the Steam Maiden format. Obviously, Steam Maiden absolutely rolled it, and now that that deck isn't there anymore, it's a very, very viable deck. Pale Moon. As an enthusiast myself, the deck is kind of average, to be honest. Like, it has Cutie Paratrooper, but there's a lot missing. Like, if you compare this deck to Shadows, to Great Nature, to Gear Chronicle even, to Genesis, to Granblue, these decks have complete engines, right? Starting from grade 1, starting from grade 2, has aggressive capabilities, hand advantage. This is something that Pale Moon doesn't have. And until we get that, this deck kind of lies in C and D. And to be honest, like, it may or may not be the only deck in D tier. And it's sad to say, and you know, I love Pale Moon, it's my favorite clan, but to see that here is like pretty concerning. Now, once the VPR comes out for Pale Moon, then this might change, because the VPR I suspect will be some sort of multi-attacker. And to give Pale Moon a multi-attacker in V format is pretty strong. So I'm gonna hold it now till the V promo comes out, but as of the moment, it is just, you know, could be better. Granblue. So I think Granblue is an S tier deck, and people will be like, you must be kidding, right? Well, if you think about it, if you date back to BSF 2019, the BSFO, right? BSFO had Prism, it had Luard, and it had Prism, Luard, mainly those two, right? And Granblue was there along with them. And Granblue, you know, fared well. The deck never changed since then, right? Sure, had Beatrice, but even then, like going into the next format, it was still good, yeah? Even into Maidens, it was relatively strong, right? So now that you take Maidens away, you're playing against a Luard that has Ildana, like an added card into the deck, so more consistency, right? You're versing the likes of Ange and Melody, you know, these decks were there when Granblue was viable, right? So if you're playing in a Springfest that was just pre-Steam Maiden, you would have seen an influx of Granblue. So the fact that we're reverting into a previous format just shows that Granblue has a lot going on for it, and it's probably one of the most consistent decks in the format. You know, you just drop a bunch of cards, mill throughout the game, and then get to 4 dragon attacks, and then that's it, your opponent's dead. So I think Granblue is one of the most consistently strong decks that hasn't changed over heck knows how long Granblue has existed in the V Premium format. So yeah, that's Granblue there. Dark Irregulars. So Dark Irregulars, now that Maiden is gone, it is an A tier deck. Still has the number of terrors, still has, you know, a bunch of draws in the number of terrors, still has Hope on Damp to essentially kill, still has Sharot, massive power lines. The deck was good, right? Obviously, it has the VPR coming up where it allows you to filter out of your deck, and that is insanely strong. It's insanely strong in V because there's not a lot of cards that allow you to selectively filter, and if you're selectively filtering your deck and compressing it, you know, of normal units, then the likelihood of you hitting triggers is huge. And not only that, right? If you filter out all these normal units early, then you start to draw into your triggers, which means your guard value is much higher than, you know, than what it was before, right? So I think Dark Irregulars has actually gotten a huge buff the moment it hits, well, it gets the VPR, and I think it's still a strong deck. It's not something like a Granblue where, you know, 4 Skull Dragon attacks and, you know, call it a day. But I do think that Dark Irregulars going into this next format is a formidable deck to bring. Definitely a deck to bring once the VPR comes out, and I think that comes out potentially in June or even July. So usually that's like where the power spike for Dark Irregulars may jump from like maybe low A to mid A, or low A to even the top of A as well. Angel Feather, Malkuth Melek, yeah, it's alright. I think it was a good meta call in the Maiden format, but now that everything else just kind of runs rampant, I'm not too sure whether Angel Feather is like great or like maybe a good meta call. I think it's definitely higher than Spikes, but I wouldn't put it in low A, only because I know that there are some other decks in here that kind of sit in low A as well. So let's put it at high B. We can change it later. The deck in Malkuth Melek, you know, still has its insane shield value, multi-attacks, you name it. Like the deck is still good, but I think, you know, there are just other decks that perform better and the engines are better. And, you know, anything above B pretty much has that. Aqua Force. So Aqua Force is Thavas. Now, whether or not I put it in an S tier, I think I do. I think I put it in S tier. S tier because Thavas was good in the previous format, and now that it's getting the VPR, the consistency in that deck is much better. Nothing really changes. I mean, if you saw Stephen Lee go through with his Thavas deck with the terrific coil, like he literally slammed everybody, right, in V, which is actually insane. So the fact that we're reverting back to a previous format, like Aqua Force didn't really change. Yeah, it got a VPR that came out this month, and it just boosts the consistency, allows you to multi-attack better. Like, the card is pretty insane. The deck for Aqua Force itself doesn't really change much, and it just does what it does. It draws a lot, it has multiple excels. Yeah, the deck is just very, very solid. Let's go for Genesis. Genesis Astral Poet is still good, and you know, it does what it does. I would put it low S, but I think high A is where it's at. I think the deck itself can just randomly kill people, you know, get a bunch of like force on your marker, on your Vanguard, and then open up the Astral Players, slam and jam your opponent, hit a bunch of crits, restand, and then call it a day, right? Astral Pulse is still good. It's a deck that you still have to test against. It is a very solid pick if you are not wanting to bring any of the S tier decks. And I think, you know, even in the Maiden format, right, it was used because it was a high roll deck. And if you couldn't beat Maiden, you had to kill them early, right? And sometimes, right, Genesis can do that. The only problem with that is that now you can't high roll against decks that can generate advantage early, right? The likes of Granblue can filter out, you know, PGs, Shadow Paladin can hard draw, Aqua Force can draw, like even Dark Irregulars can draw. Like, the Genesis game plan doesn't really change, right? It's still the same deck, it still does what it does, and you know, it may very well be that Genesis could potentially be popped into S, but I think, you know, you gotta put respect to Astropolits, and to compare Astropolits to anything in the S tier, the engine in the S tier is just more flexible, more dynamic, and you just have more lines to play, whereas Astropolit, it's very, very linear, and you don't have very many outs other than, you know, you might drive check a bunch of crits, or, you know, you have like Astraeos or Eosanasis to PG or whatever it is, but you can see that the S tier decks have more lines of play. That's ultimately what, you know, we're discussing here. Gold Paladin, Spectral Duke, still good. You know, we saw results in the Maiden format for this, especially in Australia. I think Aya got top 8 with Spectral Duke. Still a solid deck. I think a lot of people, you know, obviously with the exit of Percival, you know, Gold Paladin kind of needs to find a different way to play. But I think the deck itself is still good. You know, sometimes, like with Spectral Duke, you don't draw your one-off Percival before, and it's like as if you didn't play Percival at all, right? But we still saw results with it, and this is why I think it's still an A tier deck. But I wouldn't put it at the top of A, because I think putting respect for Genesis and Royals there is much better. So I think maybe mid to low A tier is pretty much where I'll put it. Great Nature. Great Nature is an S tier deck, and I think it's one of the best decks in the format at the moment. Now that its one big boogeyman weakness is gone in Steam Maiden, Leopold can finally shine. I think there's been a lot of, you know, Leopolds out there that haven't been able to show any results because Maiden was just so oppressive, and now that, you know, Maiden is gone, we will see much more Leopold results coming into this format. Kagero. I actually don't know what Kagero even got in the clan collection other than like Lawkeeper, Blazing Flare, Rebirth, I don't know. I think it's just a B tier deck. It has very low advantage. It just does what it does. Sometimes might kill, but I don't know. Dauntless is alright, but I wouldn't put Dauntless as an engine, well, with its engine in the A tier. I think it being in B tier is completely fine. And just note that, you know, the B tier is like, you know, the standard, you know, the benchmark to go for, and anything above that is like good and really good. Cool, so we'll put Kagero there. Battle Sisters, OTT Susanoo. I think Batsis is okay. I think Batsis may go low A. I mean, I don't know if I put it in low A because I can see a definitive line between A decks and B decks. I think Batsis is, you know, does what it does. It has like guard restrict on its rear guards, and you know, can sometimes flip a bunch of crits, and then yeah, your opponent's just dead. So maybe it goes in high B, low A, so like you can kind of toss between these two slots. But I think it being at the top of B gives pretty much the brink of, you know, the bridge between B and A. So I think we'll just put it there. We may reevaluate later on. But yeah, I think that's a really nice spot for OTT at the moment. Mega Colony, boy. I'm sad to say that actually Mega Colony is worse than Pale Moon at the moment. And now that I think of it, to be honest, I think Pale Moon can go into low C just because of the comparison between Pale Moon and Mega Colony. So ignore everything that I said before about Pale Moon not being a viable deck in comparison to something like Mega Colony. Mega Colony didn't really get anything, unfortunately. Yeah. Murakumo. Murakumo has Yasue. I think Yasue is solid. With Shiryuki, I guess it's got its PR. It has weasels. Yeah, I think it just does what it does. Sometimes you can just win. We saw, you know, on stream for like the previous BROs with Yasue, you know, still winning. Yeah, I think it's just a respectable deck. I think putting it in B is fine in comparison to everything in A and S. Bermuda Triangle, one of the best decks in the format. So these are not in any particular order. With the release of Meep, I think Melody is a very, very solid deck. Anj is, you know, defined as one of the most solid decks in the format. The deck didn't really change from Worlds, and there were a lot of representatives bringing Anj to Worlds as well. So I think Bermuda, one of the best decks in the format, definitely something to look out for. Link Joker, so we have Messiahs, Chaos Breaker Messiah. I think these, you know, Link Joker itself, you gotta put respect to that. I think Link Joker sometimes can just randomly win. It was a really good meta call in the Steam Maiden format, but now that, you know, Maidens is no longer a thing, yeah, Link Joker I think is a alright deck. Still has Volko, still has, you know, Force 2, still can be a threat, and I think it just kind of sits here. Gear Chronicle. Alright, so this is a little bit controversial, I think. So Maidens lost its Enterana, and Enterana allowed Maidens to be completely broken because it had a really good aggressive game early. It still kept the cat, and I think even with the cat, I think it's a pretty solid deck, right? You can still search out your Maidens. Your grade 2's a little bit iffy now because you've freed up 4 slots. You're no longer just, you know, randomly soul blasting and then getting a +1 every turn after it boosts. But Maidens itself still does what it does, right? You obviously lose Colossus, so that's pretty big. But I think, you know, obviously with the nerf into the draw engine, you're not going to get an insane, you know, deck that draws a bunch, multi-attacks a bunch, and aggroes you out of the game early. So I think Maidens is just okay. Still has, you know, the cats, but you just have to compromise with, you know, the Enterana being out, and then you have to like kind of include something in. So yeah, Gear Chronicle in B, good, you know, average deck now. I wouldn't put it in S. It lost its insane draw engine, and I think that really boosts the deck in the early game a lot. You can probably argue, I won't say it. I was gonna say like you could argue this being in front of OTT, but I think Batsits itself, you know, very, very good standard list or standard clan to kind of look at in terms of the V Premium format. Neo Nectar, yeah, Neo Nectar needs some help. Same with Mega Colony, but yeah, these two need some help. Nubatama, what does Nubatama have? Daihozan, doesn't really do much. Shiranui, she's okay. Yeah. I think it's just gonna sit there. DP, Enigma Storm with Brad Black. I think it's an alright deck, just see. It's not, you know, something that, you know, you would bring to a BCS or a BSF. There are many other decks that you bring, and I think, yeah, DP is just there. You could argue it being low B, but I think high C is much better. Yeah, just kind of sitting there. Nova Grapplers. So Victor with Sazander is strong. It's even stronger with the new VPR that got revealed last Tuesday or last Thursday. So at the moment it's in C, but once it gets its VPR, it jumps to B. And I think it's a very, very solid deck because Sazander now stacks up even more in power. That PR is a Soul Blast 1, which is nothing for Nova Grappler. So I think at the moment, I think it's a nice C deck. Probably a little bit lower than Dimension Police, but the moment it gets its VPR, it jumps straight back into B. Narukami. So Narukami goes in A. And I think it's like somewhere here. Maybe Book Vanquisher. Book Vanquisher is probably the deck to look out for. Book Vanquisher before had a good matchup into a lot of these, but I think a lot of these have kind of outshined Book Vank. So like anything above in the S tier pretty much would be much better in the context of, you know, handling other decks as well as Book Vank. But Book Vank itself has a very solid chance against everything else in A. And yeah, I mean, Book Vank didn't really change much, right? So I think it's a still very solid deck that, you know, bring to a BSF and, you know, you expect to do well. I think Book Vank, Dark Irregulars, and Prism were the 3 decks that won Australia last year for BSF. And, you know, it's reverting back to that format, so you probably expect to see something like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the V Premium tier list. This is what I think the meta looks like at the moment. So in S tier, the best decks in the format are Shadow Paladin, Great Nature in Leopold. Bermuda has 2 builds, Orange and Melody, Granblue in Night Rose, and Aqua Force in Thavas. And then straight under that, we have an A tier, which is like a, you know, the tier that, you know, you can consider picks from this for your BSF lineup. So Book Vanquisher, Astral Poets, Jewel Knights, Shaharot, Spectral Duke, and Volcode Messiahs or Chaos Messiah. And then in the B tier, which is like, you know, the standard benchmark that you'll look for is Batsis, Maidens, Yasue, Malkuth Melik, some sort of Rising build, as well as, you know, Dauntless. And then C tier consists of like Dimension Police, Nova Grapplers, Tachi Nuba, and Pale Moon. And then the decks that really need help is Neo Nectar and Mega Colony. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of this tier list. Would you move any of these? I think there are some that I think can move up and down. But I think overall, this is pretty much what V Premium looks like. If you guys haven't subscribed already, click subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.